I used to think that maybe if I just tried harder, if I smiled more, talked less, got better grades, or stayed out of the way, maybe then he'd notice me. Maybe then I'd matter. But no matter what I did, my father never looked at me the way he looked at my brothers. With them, he was warm. He joked, teased, clapped them on the back, called them my boys. With me, he was polite, not cruel, just distant, like I was some guest in his house he didn't quite know what to do with. My name is Grace. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas, in a house that always felt a little too perfect on the outside. Fresh-cut grass, painted porch, flag out front. But inside, it was all about the boys. Nathan and Luke, my older brothers. Nathan was the brain. Student council, debate team, early acceptance to college. Luke was the athlete. Football, baseball, anything with a scoreboard. And I was the girl with the sketchbook. The one who stayed in her room. The one who was easy to forget. At dinner, Dad would ask them questions. How was practice? How'd the exam go? What's the coach saying about next season? He never asked me. Not once. And I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it literally. If I spoke up, the most I'd get was a polite nod or a distracted, "That's nice." And then he'd turn back to them, his real children, the ones he'd introduce with pride, the ones he showed off to neighbors. At first, I thought it was just how dads were with daughters, that maybe it was normal. But then I'd see how other dads acted, at school events, at birthday parties. I'd see them hug their daughters, brag about their drawings, call them princess or champ or peanut. My dad never hugged me unless someone told him to. He never said, "I'm proud of you." Not even when I got straight A's, not even when I won an art contest in middle school. Nathan spilled a glass of water at dinner once, and Dad laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I made pancakes for the whole family on his birthday, and he barely looked up from his phone. It didn't feel like hatred. That would have been easier. It felt like absence, like I was there, breathing the same air, walking the same halls, but still invisible. And I remember thinking, very young, that maybe if I disappeared altogether, no one would even notice. I was 10 the first time I really tried to get his attention. It was Father's Day, and I'd spent all week working on a handmade card. Construction paper, markers, bits of ribbon and glitter from the craft bin. Anything I thought might make him smile. I even wrote a little poem inside. Something about how he was my hero, how I wanted to be like him when I grew up. I rehearsed giving it to him, imagining how his face would light up, how he'd maybe hug me and say something kind. I wrapped it carefully in an envelope and kept it hidden in my drawer until Sunday morning. That night, after dinner, I waited until he set his plate down and then walked over, heart pounding like I was doing something dangerous. "Happy Father's Day," I said, and handed him the card with both hands. He took it, glanced at the front, mumbled, "Thanks," and placed it on the table without even opening it. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to do, and then just sat down again. I told myself maybe he was tired. 5 minutes later, Luke strolled in from the garage with a big grin on his face. "Hey, Dad, got you something?" he said, tossing a mug across the table. It was one of those cheap ones from the gas station gift rack, black with white letters that read, "World's Best Dad." My father caught it, turned it in his hands like it was some ancient relic, and laughed. "Now this is what I'm talking about," he said. "Look at this. Your old man's a legend now." Nathan chimed in with a joke, and suddenly the table was buzzing with laughter. The mug got passed around like it was a trophy, and I just sat there, staring at the envelope still lying unopened by his plate. I'd worked on that card for hours. Luke had probably grabbed the mug on the way home from the gym. I don't think it was the mug that hurt me. Not really. It was the way he reacted to it. The way his whole face changed. The way his voice lifted. Like Luke had done something brilliant. It didn't even cross his mind to ask if I'd made anything. I watched him drink from that mug for months. He took it to the office. Showed it off like it meant something. My card eventually disappeared. Maybe it ended up in the trash. I never asked, but that moment planted something in me. A quiet truth I didn't want to admit yet. That no matter how hard I tried, someone else could always do less and still get more. There were jokes I didn't understand, phrases they'd throw around at the dinner table that made everyone laugh. Except me. "Remember the raccoon in Yosemite?" Dad would say. And all three of them, Nathan, Luke, and him, would burst out laughing. I wasn't on that trip. They went camping without me because it's more of a guy's thing. When I asked if I could come next time, Dad just smiled and said, "You'd be bored, sweetie. No bathrooms, no Wi-Fi." As if that settled it. As if I didn't want to be with them, even in the dirt and bugs. They had their stories, their traditions, their rhythms. Saturday football games in the backyard, grilling on the deck, fishing trips every summer. I was never told I couldn't join, but I was never really invited either. And after a while, you stop asking. You learn to take the hint. I'd be inside, setting the table or finishing chores, while they tossed the football around or cleaned their fishing rods. The laughter through the window was always louder than anything I heard when I was in the room. Sometimes Mom would notice me watching and gently say, "Why don't you go out and join them?" But there's only so many times you can walk into a circle that doesn't open for you before you just stop trying. Dad would sometimes say, "You know, Grace isn't really into sports." Like that excused it all. Like being a girl automatically meant I didn't want to belong. But I did. I really did. Not because I liked football, I didn't. But because I liked the idea of being wanted there. Included. Missed when I wasn't. They had nicknames for each other. Captain. Slugger. Coach. When Dad walked into the room and said, "Where's my team?" he wasn't talking about the whole family. He meant them. The boys. The trio. I was part of the background noise. The one who handed out napkins, cleared plates, smiled at the right times. I was the support crew for their spotlight. Never the reason it was shining. It's not that I wanted to be the favorite. I just wanted to matter equally. But in that house, in that dynamic, I was always just a shadow on the wall, visible only when I got in the way. In high school, I threw myself into academics like it was the only way out. I signed up for every honors class I could, stayed after school for tutoring, joined clubs I didn't even like just to pad my resume. While other kids were at football games or hanging out at Sonic, I was at the library, hunched over textbooks, chugging lukewarm coffee from a vending machine. I didn't do it for college. Not at first. I did it for him. I thought maybe if I brought home something undeniable, certificates, awards, glowing letters from teachers, he'd finally say the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I'm proud of you, Grace." That's all I wanted. One sentence. But every time I'd lay down another milestone, the house stayed quiet. There was the time I won the state scholarship, $5,000 toward college, a big shiny certificate, a photo in the local paper. Mom taped it to the fridge. Dad walked by it at least a dozen times that week and never said a word. Meanwhile, when Luke got mentioned in a football article for catching a decent pass, Dad bought 10 copies and mailed them to relatives. At the dinner table, Nathan would talk about his internship in DC, and Dad would lean forward, eyes wide, asking questions, nodding like a proud mentor. I'd mention getting invited to a national academic summit, and he'd just blink and go, "Huh, sounds fancy." And then he'd turn back to Luke and say something about next Friday's game. I started measuring his attention in seconds. 15 for Luke, 10 for Nathan, maybe 2 for me, if I was lucky. Eventually, I stopped bringing things home. What was the point? I still worked hard, harder than ever, but I stopped expecting recognition. I hung the certificates in my own closet. I filed away the letters in a folder no one else ever opened. I celebrated my victories in silence, alone in my room, curled up with a book and a can of soda. But the silence started to shift. At first it hurt, then it hardened, and eventually, it fueled me. If no one was going to clap for me, I'd learn to clap for myself. Quietly maybe, but steadily. Because deep down I knew, I was building something they didn't see coming. At some point, I just stopped trying. There was no dramatic moment, no big scene. It just faded. The urge to earn his approval, to win a scrap of affection, dissolved into something colder. I didn't cry about it. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just accepted it. I was never going to be his favorite, or even his equal. So I stopped showing up with news. I stopped leaving my sketchbooks on the coffee table, hoping he'd notice. I stopped waiting for him to ask how school was going, or what my plans were. The silence became familiar. Comfortable even. When people asked about my family, I'd smile and say, "We're close." But the truth was, I didn't even feel like part of the group photo anymore. Instead, I poured everything into a plan, my plan. While my brothers went off to college with family parties and celebratory send-offs, I packed my things quietly and moved across the state to attend a smaller school on scholarship. No one helped me carry boxes. No one came to see my dorm. I figured things out alone. Took extra classes, worked a campus job, ate ramen 5 nights a week just to save money. And in the background, an idea started forming. Something bigger than a career path. I started sketching wireframes for a platform. Something digital, something useful. I didn't know what it would become yet, but it felt like mine. The first thing that was truly mine. While my brothers were posting pictures from frat parties or weekend hikes with friends, I was holed up in the student lounge with a laptop full of bugs and a to-do list that never ended. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitter about it, because I wasn't building this for anyone else. Not for applause, not for approval. I was doing it for the girl who used to hand over glittery cards and get silence in return. For the version of me that used to sit quietly at dinner, praying to be noticed. She deserved more. So I kept going. Every line of code, every sleepless night, every rejection email I turned into a lesson. It was all for her. And somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I stopped needing him. I started becoming someone who didn't ask to be seen. Someone who was building a life worth noticing, even if no one was watching. The launch day felt like stepping onto another planet. The small co-working space I had rented for months had been transformed. Rows of folding chairs, a rented projector, a table with cheap snacks that I'd arranged like it was a gala. The platform I had built, my app, my idea, my work, was finally ready. It wasn't flashy. It didn't promise to change the world, but it solved a real problem, and that was enough for the investors in the room. People arrived early. Strangers. Journalists from local tech blogs. A city council member. Even a representative from a startup fund I'd only dreamed of meeting. They shook my hand. They smiled when they saw the demo. When I stood up to speak, my voice only trembled for the first sentence. After that, it was like the years of silence had trained me for this moment. I spoke with clarity, with purpose, and they listened. When the presentation ended, something shifted. People clapped, not politely, not out of obligation, but like they meant it. One woman came up to me, eyes bright, and said, "This is going to help so many people." A man from the investment firm asked if we could talk more next week. I stepped aside for a moment, heart still pounding, and let myself feel it. Not pride exactly. It was quieter than that. A kind of stillness. A moment where I could hear myself think and not immediately silence the thought. For the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible girl in the background. I was the one at the front of the room, the one holding the mic, the one whose voice carried. But even as the congratulations flowed and the follow-up emails started pinging my phone, I didn't text anyone in my family. Not my mom. Not my brothers. Definitely not him. They didn't know where I was that day, or what I was doing. If I disappeared off the map entirely, they might not have noticed until Thanksgiving. And that realization didn't sting anymore. It just felt true. I went home that night alone, still in my launch day blazer, and ate a cold slice of pizza on the floor of my apartment. My inbox was full. My calendar was packed. My name was starting to matter to people who didn't owe me anything. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I still wondered what it would take for it to matter to the people who did. It was supposed to be a celebration. My mom had planned one of her family nights, complete with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the good plates that only came out twice a year. Nathan flew in from Chicago. Luke brought his fiancée, and Dad was already holding court at the head of the table before I even walked through the door. He was in his element, glass of wine in hand, tie loosened, telling some story about a client who couldn't read a contract properly. Everyone laughed, even Mom. I found a seat at the far end, next to the window, where the light hit just right to make me feel like I was watching a play I hadn't been cast in. I didn't expect fanfare. I didn't even expect a congrats on the launch. But some part of me, traitorous and small, still hoped someone might say something. Anything. Dinner went on like I wasn't there. Luke talked about his promotion, how he was leading a new team and might get transferred to the East Coast. Nathan told a long story about a networking event, dropping names and titles like confetti. Dad kept nodding, asking follow-ups, smiling wide like this was exactly the future he'd envisioned for his sons. When I tried to chime in, just once, with a quiet mention of the product rollout, he didn't even look up from his plate. "Sounds busy," he said, before turning back to Nathan to ask about flight upgrades. I felt my face flush, but no one noticed. I reached for my water, swallowed hard, and smiled like it didn't matter. Like I hadn't just spent 2 years building something from the ground up. At one point, Dad made a joke about how I used to be the quiet one, and everyone laughed like it was still true. Maybe it was. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell them I had investors now, that I was hiring, that someone from a major tech site had emailed me asking for an interview. They wouldn't have cared. Not really. Not if it didn't come with a trophy or a job title they recognized. I looked around the table, at the smiles, the clinking glasses, the familiar rhythm of their conversation, and realized something. I could launch a rocket from my living room, and in this house I'd still be the background noise. Still be Grace, the afterthought. And maybe it was time to stop pretending that would ever change. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. No texts, no calls. Just a reply in the family group chat 2 days before. "I'll be there." No emojis, no explanation. I could imagine the silence on the other end of that message, the awkward glances exchanged over phone screens. I hadn't shown up to a holiday dinner in over a year. No birthdays, no Christmas, not even Mother's Day. But this time was different. I arrived just after sunset, the air warm and heavy, cicadas buzzing somewhere in the trees. The driveway was full, Nathan's SUV, Luke's new truck. But there was just enough space left at the far end. I pulled in slowly, the engine of the black car purring low like it had something to say. It wasn't just any car. It was sleek, expensive, impossible to ignore. And yet I knew exactly who would try. Inside, the house looked the same as always. Neatly decorated, dimly lit, too clean to feel lived in. My mom opened the door with a soft smile and a quick hug, already distracted by something on the stove. The dining room was loud with familiar voices. Nathan and Luke were standing near the fireplace, drinks in hand, retelling some story I'd heard 100 times. Dad was at the table, laughing, carving into a slice of cake like it was his birthday instead of Father's Day. When I stepped into the room, there was a moment of pause. Not surprise, exactly. More like hesitation, as if they weren't quite sure how to greet me. "Well, look who decided to drop in," Dad said, lifting his glass with a crooked smile. Grace in the flesh. I didn't answer right away. I just walked to my seat, my old seat, farthest from him, and set a small black envelope down on the table in front of his plate. His eyes flicked to it, then to me, then back again. "What's this?" he asked, his voice light, but slower than before. I smiled. "Just something I thought you'd want to see." He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers like he didn't recognize the name on the front. Because he didn't. I'd changed it legally 6 months earlier. He squinted at the signature, trying to place it, and I watched the first shadow of confusion settle over his face. That was the moment I knew. He hadn't been watching. Not really. He'd missed the entire storm that was about to land in his lap. He opened the envelope slowly, still wearing that half smirk he always used when he thought someone was trying too hard. His fingers tugged at the flap with performative casualness, like he was expecting a gift card or maybe a joke. The paper inside was thick, high-quality stock, the kind used for contracts and real signatures. He unfolded it once, then again, and as his eyes moved down the page, the room shifted. Not audibly, no one spoke, but something in the air tightened. His smirk faltered. The smile dropped in increments, like someone turning down the dimmer on a light. His jaw tensed. His eyebrows twitched together. Then came the silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes your skin prickle. I sat completely still, watching him scan each line, each number, each legal clause that spelled out exactly what had just happened. By the time he reached the bottom of the page, the blood had drained from his face. He looked up at me like he didn't know who I was. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again. "Is this real?" he asked, voice dry, low, not loud enough for the rest of the table to hear. I nodded, just once. No smile, no gloating, just confirmation. He looked back down at the document, like maybe it would say something different the second time. Like maybe his own name wasn't listed next to the words former owner. He flipped the page over, as if another answer might be hiding on the back. It wasn't. Every line had been checked by 3 lawyers. Every word had been signed, sealed, finalized. The company he'd worked for, the one he called his, was now owned by someone else. Me. He didn't say anything for a full 10 seconds. His hands gripped the paper tighter, wrinkling the edge. Nathan leaned in, noticing something was off. "Dad?" he said quietly. "Everything okay?" Luke stood behind him now, trying to glance at the document. But Dad didn't look at them. He looked only at me, and in his eyes, for the very first time, I saw it. Fear, not confusion, not annoyance. Actual fear. The kind of fear that comes when a man realizes the ground beneath him has shifted and there's no one left to catch him. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for me, for him, for all of them. And I didn't have to raise my voice or say a word. The paper spoke loud enough. Nathan was the first to react. He snatched the paper from Dad's hands, scanning it with that same sharp focus he used in law school. His lips moved silently, eyes darting across the text. And then he froze. "Wait," he muttered. "Wait a second. Is she saying?" Luke leaned over his shoulder, squinting. That can't be right. But it was. Every word on that page confirmed the same thing. The company Dad had built, the shares he held, even the downtown condo he bragged about owning outright. It was all now listed under a different name. My name. Luke laughed once, short and confused, like he was trying to force it to be funny. "This is some kind of prank, right? Right?" No one answered, because it wasn't. Dad didn't speak. He sat there, staring into the middle distance, the tips of his fingers still pressed against the edge of the table like he was bracing for an earthquake. Nathan turned to me, his voice hard and fast, like a man who just realized the fire alarm went off 10 minutes ago. "How did you even pull this off? This is a full transfer, of assets, of authority, of everything. You've got voting control. You've got the real estate, even the damn car." His voice cracked on the last word. "You bought out the whole structure?" I didn't flinch. I built something, it grew, then it bought something else. That was all I said, because that was all that mattered. No one had asked what I was building. No one had cared. Now they wanted a manual. Luke backed away, hands on his head. "You bought the company? The one Dad's been working at for 20 years? I nodded. "And the house," I added softly. "That was part of the package." The silence that followed was suffocating. My brothers, who had always stood taller, laughed louder, taken up all the space in every room, looked suddenly small, confused, unprepared. They weren't used to losing, especially not to me, especially not like this. I could see it in their faces. They hadn't just lost status. They'd lost the story. The one where I was the quiet one. The forgettable one. The one who didn't matter. That story didn't work anymore. I'd rewritten it. And I didn't need their permission. I stood up without saying a word. No dramatic speech. No parting insult. Just calm, deliberate movement. I picked up my purse, adjusted my coat, and turned toward the door. Behind me, the silence cracked open. My brothers still trying to make sense of the paper. My father staring down at the contract like it might disappear if he blinked hard enough. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. This wasn't revenge. Not really. Revenge would have meant I cared what they felt, that I needed them to hurt the way I had. But I didn't. I wasn't walking away from them because they broke me. I was walking away because they didn't get to define me anymore. I wasn't the quiet one. I wasn't the extra seat at the table. I wasn't the daughter who didn't fit the frame. The night air was cool as I stepped outside. The porch light cast a soft glow across the driveway, and my car sat there waiting, silent and still, like it knew. I slid behind the wheel, took one last breath, and turned the key. The engine roared to life. As I backed out, I saw the front door swing open. My father stood there, framed in the light, mouth open but empty of words. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just drove. The road ahead was dark and long, but it felt like freedom. I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had already done it. On my own terms. Quietly. Thoroughly. Completely. And now they had to live with it. Somewhere along the drive, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For years, I had looked away from mirrors, skipped family photos, cropped myself out of my own memories. But not this time. This time, I looked, and I saw someone who had taken her power back, who had stopped begging to be noticed and built something too large to ignore. And it wasn't about taking up space in their lives anymore. It was about filling my own, fully, fiercely, finally. Let them keep their table, their toasts, their fading stories. I had my own story now. And I was done playing a background role in someone else's.